course, I thought it would be fun to jump on this granny dress craze. This is a simplistic pattern that has come and gone through the decades. Like, it seems to pop back up here and there, and of course it's popped back up again, and I thought it would be fun to do my version of it. So we're going to be working that up today in the Yarn Inspirations Karen Blossom Cakes. This works up so quick because we are using a 6.5 millimeter hook. This is from the Brights hook set. Let me tell you, this is crazy value. There are 15 total hooks in here. Look at that. There are 15 hooks of so many different sizes and fun colors. This is a great set to pick up, especially for these larger sizes of hooks. That's just amazing. Sometimes it's hard to find the bigger hooks, and you get them with all the sizes in the Brights hook set. You will also want to have a couple of removable stitch markers to mark the ends of your stitches. It just makes life easier. Of course, a pair of scissors, and then a tapestry needle to weave in those ends. Now, you know I go the extra mile in my ad-free PDF patterns on Etsy or Ravelry, and for this one, I have included a guide to make this dress in any weight of yarn. That way, if you wanted a lightweight summer one, maybe something by the pool as a beach cover-up, you can do that. You can pick any yarn, and you can follow that guide to make this for your size. And that's a great way to customize this as well. And I've also included a little bit of color inspiration. We all know the most popular one is that Taylor Swift color inspiration, but I've also included a few others in case you wanted to get some other ideas of how this might look in a color tone that suits you. So if you want to get that, that link is in the description. Now for today's pattern, I'm going to be working the size medium, but I want to note that for a lot of patterns, we simply look at the sizes and we say, okay, I'm usually a size small, medium, whatever, and we go with that. But that's not always what we want to do. So for me, normally, if I were to go to the store and buy a dress, a lot of times I buy the size small, depending on what style it is. And where this is a boxy dress, for me, my hips are often wider than my chest areas when it comes to trying on clothing. So it just depends on how it's shaped. And where this is boxy, I want to go by my hips. So I'll be making a size medium, and we'll talk about a few customizations along the way. Now I have included different lengths for this dress. So our starting chain is going to be going from where we want it to hit, if our thighs, our knees, wherever we want it to hit, up and over our shoulders and back down the other side. So this starting chain determines the length, and I've included several different lengths, 5 different lengths in the written pattern. And I'm going to go with the 29-inch length today, which means I will start by chaining 161 chains. Now you can use this to adjust the length if you want your starting chain. All you need to do is chain an amount of 3 plus 2. Now we are going to start working in the very first chain from the hook by doing a stacked single crochet. I like to work into the humps, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to insert my hook into that hump, a part of the chain. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and now I have 2 loops on the hook, and we will yarn over and pull through both of those loops, but we're not done yet. We're going to go back to this left bar here, and we're going to insert our hook, and then we will yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. This will make nice straight edges by working a stacked single crochet into the first stitch, but I highly recommend marking that stitch to keep track of it. You don't want to work around the side of the stitch, which is easy to do if you haven't marked it. So now we know the first stitch of this row. Then we're going to skip. Next, in the very next chain, we are going to do 2 double crochets. And now we're going to be doing our repeat across, and this is where we will skip 2 chains and then 3 double crochet into the next. And then we'll do that again, and this is what we're going to do all the way across until we get to the last 3 stitches. We will skip 2 chains and 3 double crochet into the next. I'm going to repeat this all the way across these chains and then come on back when I have 3 stitches left. Now that we are to the last 3 chains of this row, we are going to do a double crochet into the last chain. So you're going to skip 2 chains and do 1 double crochet, and that will complete our setup row. This is row 1 that we worked into the chains. Now we're going to turn our work and we're going to do row 2, and row 2 is the repeat row. It's a 1-row repeat, which makes it really nice. It's a reversible fabric, so it's, you don't have to keep track of right row or wrong row for this one. And this is how we're going to start. We're going to work into the very first stitch of the row with a stacked single crochet. We're not doing any chains here. We're going to go right into that first stitch and do a stacked single crochet to keep those edges nice and neat. And then we can grab our stitch marker and mark that first stitch of the row. Now we're going to be working in the spaces between these 3 double crochet granny groups. So each of these is a granny stitch group, and we're going to be working in between them for this pattern. And in the very first space of this row, so the space in between the first 2 stitches, we are going to double crochet 2. And this is how each row will start. Now into the next space, we are going to do 3 double crochets. And we're going to repeat doing 3 double crochets into each of those spaces until we get to the last 3 stitches of this row. So by working this across, this creates that fun granny stitch. It's really simple and fun to do. And it works up quickly with this size of yarn. So I'm going to keep working these across until I get to the last 3 stitches of this row. Now that we have these 3 stitches left in this row, we are going to finish off this last granny group. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches and simply double crochet into the last. And row 2, this row that we just did, this is our repeat for this fabric, which is fantastic because it's a 1-row repeat, nice and straight edges, and it's going to be great to work up. I also want to say right now, this is a great time to pause. Now the granny stitch in itself will stretch out a bit depending on what yarn you're using, whatever you're doing, but it's a quite flexible stitch. So there is some leeway in blocking it in terms of like if you wanted to make it slightly bigger of a fabric. But once you block, so a lot of times you can't go back. This particular yarn stays in place quite well that it may not even need to be blocked. But this is a great point to go ahead and fold this long strip in half and place it over your shoulder to see if you like where it hits you with length, because that's how it's going to sit. So we want to make sure that we like the length at this point. And if not, you can always undo and add a little bit more length or a little bit less length. Now for the size medium, I am going to repeat the row 2 until I have a total of 9 rows. And that's also a point where you can check and see how you like the width of this. So after we get this section done, there will be an 11-inch gap in the neck for the neck. And then this will be on each side of that. So you can hold it next to your neck. Like if you go center of your neck about 5.5 inches out, hold this up and then see if you like how far it drapes over your shoulder, and you kind of get an idea of how wide it's going to be. Now, if you want to add more rows to make it have more of an ease and be a little bit wider, you can, or you can also remove rows to have it be less wide. That's completely a customization up to you. So now that we have our first panel that goes front to back, we're now just going to be working on the front section. Now this once again is reversible. We're kind of mirroring everything, but this is what I'm going to call the front section. I have placed some stitch markers here to help me know kind of what I'm doing next, what I'm plotting out. But what we're going to do, this is working for the 29-inch in length, so it's a shorter version. I'm going to start this row and we're going to work it as we have been in pattern, but I'm going to stop at the 23rd space in the row. So I'm going to do the 23rd space and then stop. So now that I've worked the first 23 spaces in the row, I'm going to go ahead and remove my stitch marker. I like to mark that just so I know not to go too far. And then we are going to simply do a double crochet into the next space. So we're just going to double crochet 1 into that next space. And this is what's going to help the neckline slant instead of being so boxy and so square. So that is row 1. So now for the length that I'm doing, which is the 29-inch length, I now have a total of 70 stitches, and we're ready to turn and do row 2 of this first part of the neck. Now for row 2, we're not going to be working in the first couple stitches. We're going to work a stack single crochet into this 3rd stitch of this row. So we're going to work into that 3rd stitch, doing a stacked single crochet. And then we are going to work 2 double crochets into this first space. And then we will work the rest of the row like we normally do, working those 3 double crochets into each space. And when we get to the end, we'll simply double crochet into the last. So the rest of the row is like normal. We're just starting it doing a bit of a decrease to shape that neckline. I'm going to finish this row and then work my way back from this side for row 3, because when we're just doing the edge here normal like we normally would, but it's getting towards the neckline where we're decreasing that I want to show you row 3. Now I've come to this last space in this row, and then I am 3 stitches left. So when there's 3 stitches left, we're going to move our stitch marker, and we are simply going to do a double crochet into the last stitch and turn. We still got that nice neckline going on there, but we have not decreased any stitches for this row. For row 4, we are simply going to be repeating row 2. So I'm going to turn my work here. And what we're going to do is we are going to go into the 1, 2, 3rd stitch. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd stitch in the row, and we are going to do a stacked single crochet. And mark that stitch. It's harder to identify if you don't mark it when you're working the return row. And now in the first space, we will double crochet 2. And now we are back on track to finish out row 4 as we do any other row. So we've done our decrease at the beginning of the row, and now we're just going to finish this row like normal. So now we have worked those 4 rows of decreasing for using this yarn. Now if you are using a smaller weight yarn, you might need to do a couple repeats. So maybe do rows 1 through 4 and possibly repeat 3 and 4 again, depending on the height of your stitch, to get the slant that you want. If you're changing yarn sizes and going by the guide, you want to go by the measurement here, and you get that width and that slant that we want. So now for the center part of the front here, we will be doing 12 rows. We'll have a total of 20 rows across the front from the edge of the neck to the other edge of the neck, which is about 11 inches. It is a wider neck. If you hate wide necks and you don't want a wide neck, unfortunately, the only way to do that would be to frog back these 4 rows and add more in here so that you can take out more here in the section we're going to be doing. Because you don't just want to take out anything in here along the neck, because that will change the circumference of this and make it smaller. But the way that this is designed is with a wide neck, which I absolutely adore. And when we do that single crochet slip stitching around the top edge, we can decrease the neckline as well. And you can also play around with that and add quite a few rounds of single crochet to decrease that neck width if you don't like them that wide. So I'm going to go ahead and work in pattern, because now we're back to working in pattern here. It's all set up for us. And I'm going to work 12 rows, and then I'll come on back and we'll be doing some increasing on the other side to shape this neckline. Now, after we have done those 12 rows of just working that stitch repeat and not doing any decreasing, we're ready now to do some increasing. So I've already started the 13th row. I started it just as we start every other row in the stitch pattern repeat, and I have worked to the last 3 stitches of this row. Now for these last 3 stitches, we're going to be doing some increasing. So we're going to skip 1 stitch, and then we're going to work 3 double crochets into the next. And now we're going to work 1 double crochet into that last stitch. And that now increases by those cluster stitches. So we've added 1 more cluster stitch. It's kind of how we did on this side, how we were decreasing. Now we've done the same amount of increasing, and we'll turn our work for row 14. Now for row 14, we're not going to be doing any increasing on this edge, but it will look increased by starting to do the first stitch with a stacked single crochet. And then in this very first space, how we've like always worked this, we're going to be doing 2 double crochets. And now we're going to be working the rest of this row in pattern as well. So this is just an in pattern row, just as we've worked all those other rows. So I'll continue this for row 4 for the second row of this section. So we've increased 1, and then here's another one. So for this section, we did 12 rows, and now we've done row 1 and row 2. I know I said row 13 and 14 if we were counting from way back down here, but for this section, we've done our first increased row. This is our second increased row, and I'm going to come back and work the third increased row until I get to this point, because that's where we'll be doing an increasing again. The third row is going to start the same way as the stitch pattern repeat. And now for row 3 of the increasing, we're going to do this just like we did on row 1. So I've worked the last space and I have 3 stitches left, and we are going to skip 1 and do 3 double crochets into the next. And then 1 double crochet into the top of that stacked single crochet from the row below. And then we have completed our increasing. Now we just need to do 1 more row for row 4 for this increasing section, but we're just doing it in pattern. So that will be done in pattern. It will look a little bit like an increase, but it's just in pattern. And the stitch count is back to 70 stitches for the 29-inch length dress. So I'm just going to stack single crochet in the first for row 4, and then in the first space, double crochet 2. And then I will double crochet 3 in the next space and continue on in pattern for the remainder of row 4. And after row 4, we have done this section. This section will be complete. So we will move on to the other side, which means at row 4, when we get all the way to the end, we are going to be fastening off. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fasten off the yarn on this side. And we have finished this section, and now we need to basically just mirror this on the other side. So we're going to go back to this long strand. Remember when we did these, we were talking about this area, and now we're going to be working on this other side so that it matches. Now, in order for us to work this and have it still look really good, you'll notice that the stitches that we were working here, once we fastened off here, we still need to turn our work. We want these to face us, not be on the wrong side of those granny stitches. So we're still going to be turning our work and then reattaching our yarn after skipping some spaces, because we really want the last row that we worked to look the same. We don't want to do like 2 rows together that are right side facing for those stitches. So we want to keep it in that stitch pattern. So for this size, I am going to go ahead and turn my work, and then we're going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, and we're going to join our yarn into that 6th space. And this way it keeps all of our stitch counts nice and even. Everything's gonna work great to be mirrored. I'm going to join with a slip knot, and then I'm going to make a stacked single crochet. Now we're going to be decreasing, but we're just decreasing, starting moving the other way, but all the instructions will be very similar because we're starting the row with decreasing versus ending our row with decreasing. So I'm going to do this in the first stitch, and then I'm going to skip those next 3 and go right into that next space. So right into the next space, we are going to double crochet 3. So we're starting this row a little bit different than we normally do. We're not doing those 2 double crochets. We're just doing a single crochet or a stack single crochet in this first space, and then going right to the next space by doing 3 double crochets. And then the rest of this row will be worked in pattern. So I'm going to finish this row and work my way back to show you how to do row 2 of decreasing on this back body section. Now I've worked row 2, I'm coming back the other way for row 2 of this back section of decreasing. And I have worked this space like normal with 3 double crochets, and I have 4 stitches left in this row. We are going to skip 3 stitches, so we're skipping one of those groups, and we're simply going to double crochet into the last. And we have not changed the stitch count for this row. And now we're going to turn and we're going to be doing row 3. And now for row 3, we are going to start this row by doing that stacked single crochet. And we are going to be skipping this first space. So kind of how we did here, we just kind of went right into that first group. We're going to do that again. We're going to go right into this group over here, the space, and we're going to do 3 double crochets. And that will help decrease once again on this row. So now I'm going to go ahead and finish out this row. Use a stitch marker if you need to make sure that we know what stitches is right here when we work back that way. It's never a bad idea to do so. I'm going to finish out this row in pattern like we normally would, and then I'm going to work my way back up for row 4 and show you how to finish out row 4. And now for row 4 of this decreasing on the back side, we're going to do the same thing that we did for row 2. We're going to skip 3 stitches and simply double crochet into that last. And now for the length I'm making, the 29 inch in length, we are now at 67 stitches. And now that we have done those 4 rows of decreasing, we're going to be repeating exactly what we did on this first side, and that's those 12 rows of not doing any decreasing. So I'm going to go ahead and do those 12 rows working in that stitch pattern, and then we'll come on back and do the increasing again. Now after doing the 12 rows without doing any increasing or decreasing, we just have 1 section left on the back part here, which is 4 rows of increasing. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. Now for row 1 of increasing on the back side, we're going to start by doing a stacked single crochet, and then we can mark that stitch. And then we're going to be doing 3 double crochets into this very first space. So this very first space, we're going to do 3 double crochets this time. And then we're going to continue to work the rest of the row in pattern. And then on row 2, I'm going to work it until I come back to this edge that we're doing some increasing on, and I'll show you how to do row 2. Now, as I worked down row 2, I have 4 stitches left in this row, and we are going to be working in between the center space of those 4 stitches. So we're going to go right in between those 4 stitches, and we are going to double crochet 3. And then we're going to move our stitch marker, and in the last stitch of the row, we will double crochet 1. And now we're going to turn our work. So now for row 3 of this back side of the dress increasing, we are simply going to be working in patterns. So we're going to start with a stacked single crochet, and then 2 double crochets into that first space, and then working in the spaces across as we have before with 3 double crochets. So this row is just simply doing it in a regular. We're not adding anything on this row. And then come back for row 4. I'm going to work it as we normally do all the way across until I get back to the end, and I'll show you how to finish off row 4. Now as I come to the end of this row 4 increasing, I'm going to go to the very last stitch in this row and double crochet 2, and that gets us to the same stitch count as where we started on this other side before we were decreasing. So now we're ready for the next steps. Now, we don't want to fasten off just yet because the next section is going back to working the other side of this body, the last body section here. And to do that, we have this open hole we now need to deal with, and I like to keep it as even as possible. So what we're going to do before we fasten off for this length, we are going to go ahead and chain 17. Now, if you had skipped more than 5 spaces down here, so down here we had skipped 5 spaces. If you had skipped 6, then you're going to be chaining 20. But for this example, I'm going to chain 17. Now, after chaining 17, you will want to double check to make sure your chains aren't too tight and that they look okay and even with the width on this side. Now, next we are going to be fastening off this yarn. Now, carefully pull this end through and you have 17 chain stitches here. Now, you have two options. You can leave this as is, and when we do the next row that we're going to be doing, you'll be coming back this way. You'll just start to work into the chains, and you can use your tail end to kind of weave in any gaps that would happen here. Or you can take your yarn needle, and we're going to do what's called an invisible join, and it won't mess us up on a stitch count or anything. And this is really what I prefer to do. So I am going to zoom in here to where we are going to be doing this invisible join. Now, to do an invisible join without adding any stitches, we want to keep the stitch count the same. We're going to skip this edge stitch. We're going to skip the first stitch, which that's a stacked single crochet. And we're going to insert into the second stitch as if to crochet it. And we're going to pull this through. And we can see that this is going to start to make a mock stitch. You want to make sure that nothing is twisted here. And we pulled our yarn through the second stitch. Now we're going to go back down the center of the last chain that we did. We're going to gently pull that. And then we're going to tighten this until it looks just right. So we've made a mock stitch here. When you look on the top, you can't really tell. This is one thing I like about it. We have a difference in yarn color slightly, but this will make it so now across the top here, it's the same stitch count. We haven't done anything different. We've just added a mock stitch to join over this stitch, and now we can go ahead with our next steps, and we can weave in this end. We don't need it anymore. So now that we are set up for this next step that we're going to be doing, I'm going to go ahead and turn my work because we want to make sure we're still working in patterns. So the row that we're going to be working into, we want to see the wrong side of it. And this is where we fastened off before. We are going to rejoin on this side. So I'm simply going to join my yarn, and this is going to be worked in that stitch pattern that we are used to. We're going to start that very first stitch with a stacked single crochet. It probably would have helped me to weave in this end first. There we go, pull that down nicely. And then we're going to do the 2 double crochets into that first space. And then we're simply going to work 3 double crochets into every space across until we get to that chain. I want to show you what to do across that chain space at the neck. So now we have come to the part where we're going to be working across the chains. So this next set of stitches is 3, so that's like a granny stitch right there in itself. So we're going to go to the first chain, and we are going to do 3 double crochets into that very first chain. Then we are going to skip 2 chains and then 3 double crochet in the next. And then we're going to repeat that until we get to this other side. I'm going to show you what to do over here when the stitch count is a little bit different when we're going back into that repeat across that side. All right, so now that I have worked most of the chains, I have 1 chain left, and we're going to leave that one unworked. It's like counting as this set of 3 that we've got going on right here that we had done below. So we're counting that as a stitch, and we're skipping 3. Basically, we're going to that center space right to the next step. And now we're just going to finish out this row in pattern, and we are back to working this big section. Now we're ready to keep working so that we have as many rows here on this side. So we're just working long rows again, back and forth, doing the amount of rows we did on the first side. So if you made any adjustments, you're going to just do as many rows as you did here, which means for this pattern, I'm going to be doing 9 rows on this other side to match this side. And then after that, it is the perfect time to block. Just trust me. When blocking flat, it is so much easier to get a nice look. So you can block the body part of this to dimension, and that will really help open up some of those stitches and get it right on track. The next thing we will need to do is make the sleeves, and the sleeves are simple rectangles. So we'll be starting similar to how we did with the body of this, where we're just making some chains and working a stitch repeat. So for the sleeves, we will start by chaining 47 chains. Now, this beginning chain will determine the length of the sleeve. So if you want to try on the body and then take a measurement from the edge of the body along the shoulder, like it'll be a drop shoulder, so just to the left or right of the shoulder, to the wrist or wherever you want the sleeve to hit, then that's the length you would want your sleeve to be. And you would simply chain an amount of stitches that length in a 3+2 chain repeat. Now to start this chain, we are going to simply be following those same instructions that we had done on the body when we started that. So we'll start in the very first chain from the hook, doing a stacked single crochet and mark that. And then in the next chain, we will double crochet 2. And then a repeat for the rest of the row will be to skip 2 chains and work 3 double crochet stitches into the next chain. And then when you get to the very end of this row, we'll simply skip some chains and double crochet into the last. So this is going to follow that same instruction for row 1, and then row 2 is just our 1 row repeat that we are very familiar with at this point. And we're just going to be making a rectangle for the sleeve, and you can fasten off, leaving a tail end to attach this to the body portion. But before we do any type of seaming, I highly recommend weaving in any ends where you may have joined a new ball of yarn and then blocking this out. Blocking will help with seaming. It'll just make everything easier to do. It'll be nice, crisp, and clean edges and the size that we want it to be. And I find blocking things flat before seaming gets a better look in the end. Now I like to work my neckline when the garment is still flat. I find it easy to do, but you can also wait to do the neckline until after you've assembled the whole thing. It really doesn't matter what order you do this in. And this is how we're going to do our neckline. We're going to take our yarn, and I like to attach it on one of the sides. So you're just going to attach it along the side. We're going to do an invisible join at the end here, so it's not going to be noticeable where we attached it. I'm going to go ahead and chain 1, and then I'm going to slip stitch all the way around. And I like to do a slip stitch round because I find that it makes it much cleaner when it comes to doing a single crochet trim. So we're going to slip stitch all the way around, and when we get to these edges, we'll be doing more slip stitches per row. So on this side it's really easy because we're working 1 slip stitch per stitch, and on this side you're going to work 1 slip stitch per chain stitch, and then we'll work along these edges. Now when it comes to working across the edges where we're working along the row side, I like to do about 3 slip stitches per every 2 rows. And this neckline can also be adjusted at the next steps that we're going to be doing. So if you feel like it's a bit wide, we're setting ourselves up to do any type of neck style we want. So now that we have slip stitched all the way around, this really helps define that neckline, and it's still a wide neck, and you can even use it as an off the shoulder neck, but we want to do one more round of this. Now if you want to leave it with the slip stitches, that's fine, or you can do 1 or even more rounds of single crochets if you wanted a less wide neckline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the very first stitch of this row in the back loop only. So I'm going in the back loop only, and I'm going to single crochet all the way around. And I love using the back loop only of the slip stitches because it leaves a really nice line to define that neckline. So we're just going to single crochet all the way around into that back loop only. And I love the look of this. And then if you wanted to keep going, you could do more single crochet rounds to make that neckline wide, you know, the trim wider, which would decrease the neckline overall. But this, I'm just going to do 1 round of single crochet in the back loop only. And then when I get all the way back around, I'll come back and show you how to do that invisible join. Now that we've made it all the way around, I'm going to go ahead and fasten off and grab my yarn needle. Now we've done an invisible join once before when we were doing the chains for this, and here's how we're going to do it again. So we're going to make a mock stitch, but we don't want to create an extra stitch in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next stitch and go to the next and insert that like we would if we were to crochet it, and pull that through. And then go back down the last stitch worked through the center of it and pull through. And what that does is it just creates a mock stitch on top of that one. And then it's pretty seamless and you can't tell where we started and stopped other than a slight color change. All right, so our next steps are to attach these sleeves. And this is how they go in the main design. I mean, you can put the sleeves direction wise this way if you want, but I designed it to go this way, and the row count is what makes the width of the sleeve, and the starting chain is what makes the length of the sleeve. So we're simply going to take this sleeve and we're going to line it up to one side. Now you'll want to find the center of your sleeve and the center of the garment, and you can do that by folding each of those. And I also recommend, when it comes to any type of seaming, to grab either stitch markers or sewing pins to pin it across to make sure that you're going to seam evenly. Now for the size that I made, I know that the length of the sleeve, the width of the sleeves is 28 rows. So I know at the 14th, in between the 14th and 15th row is my center. And then same thing on the garment. I'm just going to take my center stitch. I'm just going to line those up. And then I'm going to grab some pins and I'm going to pin that in place. I find pinning it in place before I start seaming works best. It's just you're least likely to make mistakes or have it bunch anywhere. Even if you just grab some stitch markers and you're just simply pinning to using stitch markers to gather them together just so that we keep the same tension across, that works great. And then I'm going to grab my yarn needle and this tail end that we had left, and I'm simply going to seam this together across. Now, I'm probably going to do like a whip stitch, not just through the chains. I might go through some of this to really gather that stitch, and we're just going to seam those across. Now, after you've seamed all the way across, we're going to go ahead and repeat that on the other side to get the other sleeve on there. And you can weave in these ends, and the last thing we'll have to do is just 2 seams to turn this into a dress. Now, this next part is my favorite part of this whole construction. We are simply going to pinch halfway on each side of the neck. The sleeves are going this way, and we're simply going to fold this in half. And once we fold it in half, we have our dress. It's so cool how this works. We only have to do 2 seams left, so let's talk about that. All right, so we have now what looks more like a dress, and what we're going to do is we're going to start at the bottom here. We're going to attach our yarn needle, and we're going to seam up the side and then across the arm, and we'll repeat that on the other side, and then we have our dress. So we're going to do the same type of seaming that we did on the sleeves, and we're just going to seam the sides together and underneath the arms. Now, once we have the side seams done and underneath the arm, now we have the shape of a dress. And the last and final steps will be to do some trim around the sleeves. It's done the exact same way we did the neck, and we're working along these edges, and you just want to make sure when you're doing the sleeves that nothing pulls, that you're slip stitching around evenly. So you may need to place more than 3 stitches per 2 rows in certain areas to maintain that to be the exact same tension. And then you can also do that on the bottom of the dress to finish off that with a nice edge as well. And then it's time to find your favorite accessories and wear this out wherever you want to go and have a lot of fun wearing it. Thank you so much for joining me for this fun tutorial. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for more fun projects soon.